Hello again. Welcome to Print Island and back to the top of my lighthouse. My name is Richard Askam. I am, as you know by now, the lighthouse keeper here on Print Island, and I have the joy pretty much inviting who I want to come up to the top of the lighthouse and chatting to me. And today is one of my old friends, Nick Benkovich, who's not wearing enough clothes. It's too cold for t-shirts, Nick.
Well, here in Southern California, it's a beautiful day for those of you in the metric system. It's probably around 20 degrees C. For those in the rest of the world, it's a lovely day in Southern California, classically in the 70s.
Well, it's been lovely chatting. Bye-bye.
It's great.
That does sound rather nice. Whereabouts in Southern California?
Just slightly north of San Diego.
Okay, yeah, well, it's a very nice part of the world, particularly at this time of year, actually. So it's a good, because it gets quite hot, silly hot there, doesn't it, in the summer?
Well, it's funny. I actually live on the coast. I can stand in my backyard and I can see the Pacific Ocean. So we get these beautiful ocean breezes. So it never really gets too hot here.
Okay.
But you don't have to go far inland before it'll go up quite significantly
Sure.
and make a big difference. But here on the coast, it's temperate most of the year round. Last year my kids were actually in the pool on Christmas Day. So,
Okay.
it's pretty hard to beat that.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I can't beat that here on Print Island, I'm afraid. So, although I do enjoy the sea breezes as well, but sometimes they come from the north, and like today, that
Yes.
can be a little bit cool.
Yep, certainly can. I certainly spent my my number of days and weeks and months in the UK, and it can certainly get quite cool there.
Indeed, indeed. Well, we won't dwell on the weather because that's what us Brits do all the live long day. So. But listen, if there's anybody out there watching this, listening to this, and you may not have met Nick, I doubt it because he knows everybody. But let's imagine that there's one or two people out there that don't know who Nick is. Give me the flyby. Give me the Nick Benkovich 5-minute pitch.
Yeah, look, as you can probably guess from my accent, for those that don't know me, I'm originally from Sydney, Australia. About a little over 2 decades ago, I moved to Vancouver, Canada. Ended up running product management for a company that many of us remember very dearly, Creo, who was ultimately acquired by Kodak. Unfortunately, that didn't end out sort of the way most people had hoped. And ultimately in 2012, a good friend of mine at EFI, Jeff White, gave me a call and said, "Sounds like time for a change, my friend." So I joined EFI, spent 13 years with EFI, EPS, running product management. And now it's time for the next adventure.
Well, that's always it's an exciting point in time. I know these things come with trepidation, but every sort of change of direction, every pivot, if you like, for any business, whether you're working for them or running one, it's a time of excitement as well as risk. Do you embrace both sides of that?
Yeah, I do. I see this as an opportunity. At a certain point, you get into the daily grind of doing what you do. And while you can be very good at it, you're not really looking at what the next adventure could be, what the next challenge could be. And for me, this is just another adventure, another challenge. And I love the opportunity to look for that next challenge.
And do you think, let's go all the way back to the young Nick in Sydney, Australia, running down to the beach every day and living a healthy lifestyle, you bloody Australians. What did you see? What was in your head about mapping out where you'd like to be, what you'd like to do?
Well, it's funny you ask that. I said to my wife the other night, if you'd asked me 25 years ago, would I be living the life that I live today? Absolutely, I'd have bet money against it. When I was growing up, my father's a carpenter, and I wanted to be a pilot. So it was sort of am I going to go into the trades like many of my relatives, or am I going to pursue the flight career? Neither of those turned out to be true. I often tell people, I made a wrong turn. I ended up in the print industry and I've been here ever since. And honestly, I love it. I have a passion for it. I have a passion for the customers, for the products, for the industry itself. So, no regrets, just opportunities.
I've got this vision in my head now of your father as a carpenter, making a plane that you wanted to fly. And that blows my mind completely. But how did what was your journey in? What was your route into print?
Uh, Pure accident. I was working for a company that imported hardware into Australia. Think storage units, screens, and so on. The company I was working for at the time announced that they were going to become the distributor for the oldest prepress software, and I said, "What's prepress?" And they said, "Don't worry about it. You'll work it out. You're going to be the guy that does all the support." So, of course, doing what I do, I looked up the database. I found a customer that had all three products. I literally went to them and said, "Hey, I don't know anything about this stuff. Can you help me? Can I come work here for a couple of weeks for free and learn the business?" I found that it was something that I was passionate about, and it led to the next opportunity and the next opportunity. When Aldous merged with Adobe, and then we spun it to ScenicSoft and iMation. Through those various cavitations of the business, it just presented more opportunities, and you've got to take them.
And I guess if your goal was to be a pilot, you've got quite an inquisitive mind for navigation and destination and all that kind of stuff, but also quite a technical engineering sort of mind that to make the damn thing work right, to keep it in the air. So that pre inclination is what probably got you interested in how print works.
Well, interestingly enough, after I did the software thing initially, I went back into a hardware sort of role, actually installing CTP devices and the early film setters. I remember one of my first implementations was actually helping install an Avantra 44. For those of you that are younger, you won't remember that. That's film setting. That came before CTP. I was doing drum scanners. We were working on proofing devices. I had a nice little business in Australia doing that. And it just sort of naturally came to an end. And when it did, a very good friend of mine at ScenicSoft said, "Hey, we've got a great role in Canada. Do you want to go?" And I said to my wife, "Let's do it. Let's make the move." And she said, "Fantastic. 2 to 3 years. We'll make a big adventure." I have 4 children, big adventure with the 4 kids. We'll see places we've never seen. And fast forward 22 years later, we never went back.
Wow. And that's the thing, of course, when you start these journeys, if you start a journey with no end, then you're always on it, which is brilliant. And Vancouver's a lovely city. I've had the pleasure of being there. I've been skiing up in the mountains there as well. It's a beautiful part of the world.
It is. I will tell people that I've lived in 3 of the most beautiful cities in the world: Sydney, Vancouver, and San Diego. 3 beautiful cities. My wife has been the most incredible supporter. Every time I say, "Hey, let's try this next adventure," she says, "Sure, I got you. Let's do it." And the kids have enjoyed the journey along the way.
So let's go back into those early days then in the print industry, and I guess what you're describing there, albeit some of our viewers will go, "What?" But it was the cutting edge, the bleeding edge, if you like, of innovation. Trying some stuff that some of it worked and some of it didn't work. But how much of what you did back then can you still see iterations of today?
I think the natural inclination to look for opportunities to innovate are still there, but to a lesser extent. I think the challenge is, when I started in the print industry 3 decades ago, in many ways it was a license to print money. Margins are getting tougher, competition's getting heavier, and the business has fundamentally changed. Now, there's some things that we can relate to, the skills of imposition. I did a training for someone recently on imposition, and the first thing the kid did was turn his head sideways and try to work out why the pages were upside down. We've lost a certain amount of that skill in the industry, but I think, the opportunity is there. Print, we've all heard that phrase, print dead. Print isn't dead; it's just different. My neighbour, the accountant, has said to me several times, "Oh, isn't print dead? Nobody does print anymore. No, we don't print newspapers anymore, but we print still. We just print stuff that's different." And so I think the desire for the quality of the work that we have. I've been a big believer for many, many years that the 3 things that a print buyer cares about, the quality, the price, and the on-time delivery. And honestly, you get 2 out of 3 right. You could be the guy that's always on time with great quality, but you're not the cheapest guy in town. You're going to keep that customer. So it's still a challenge, there's still a craft to it. That's what I love. It's sort of science and craft at the same time.
And that science bit, I think, is where the industry has moved so quickly over the last 3, 4, 5 years, probably since COVID, I would say, because a lot of the necessity that COVID created to reinvent and adapt to the brave new world that we were all in at the time has spawned quite a lot of critical thinking, particularly in the software space. And I always say that the print industry is the tech industry; it just doesn't know it. How on earth do you get that across now to the next generation that see print as a bit old fashioned, but actually they see tech as the best thing since sliced bread?
I talk about this all the time. If you go into a classroom, remember back in the, before my time, but in the 50s and 60s, even into the 70s and 80s, you'd go into a classroom, who wants to be a pilot? Who wants to be a fireman? And people would put up their hand. Who wants to work in the print industry? Right? The only people even knew what it was were the people who were children of someone in the industry. And I think what we have to change is the perception of the industry. We are about communication, right? Whether that's direct mail, whether that's signage, we're a communications industry. One thing that I find is interesting, and I wrote an article recently about this, was the fact that as an industry, we're terrible communicators in many ways. You go to the website and we talk about, this exciting new piece of kit that we just bought. Okay, tell me as a print buyer why I care about that. So I think the getting people to understand that it is a highly technical industry, I think invites people to get engaged. I recently did a talk on AI, and there was a kid in the front row, and he said, "I just spent 4 years at college learning print estimating. Is my career over?" And the answer is no, it's just different than it was. I think technology is everywhere in our industry, and we have to be mindful of that.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's the blend, isn't it? I was laughing with somebody the other night about AI, and it is the hot topic, of course, and friend or foe, and all that kind of thing. But I see it as the same point in time when everybody went from a Nokia to a BlackBerry. And it's like, so why do I need to type on a screen? I've got buttons here, I've got a stylus here, and you look at all of the evolutions and iterations of tech over only the last 20 years, Nick. I mean, it's not quite 20 years since the iPhone was invented. So we're in a very, very, very small piece of history right now. But the fear that engenders in pretty much everybody, that point of change, and yet in 20 years' time, we'll look back on it and laugh. Surely that's the same with the print industry, right? This whole melange that's going on at the moment about should we, shouldn't we, do we, how, it's all going to level out at some point, isn't it?
I think it is, and I'll use your iPhone analogy. 20 years ago, you saw someone walking down the street with a flip phone and a Walkman, with a little cassette in it, and you thought, that guy's got it. That guy's tech savvy. I was that guy too. And then, but nobody said, hey, what I'd really love is a device that had all of them jammed into one. And now, if you saw someone with a Walkman and a flip phone, I mean, come on, this is the dark ages. I think this industry is the same. I think people need to understand that these are tools, right? Whether that's the MIS platform you work on, the prepress platform, injecting AI into your workflow. These are tools to improve your workflow. Again, my dad's a carpenter. If you got to drive a nail, could you do it with a wrench? Yeah, but if you've got a hammer, you use it all day long. It's about the right tool, and technology that's coming to our industry are great tools to really improve our workflow.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we're standing today on top of the Lighthouse here on Print Island, Nick, which gives us a beautiful view of the industry as a whole, 360 degrees. What do you see coming our way in 2026 and beyond? What's your feeling about how the industry is going to be able to evolve?
Yeah, I think what's interesting to me is, the couple of things that we've seen the last couple of years, diversification of print. There's the days when I started, which was, 4/4 cut and fold, you're out the door. That's gone. It's about adding value add on that product. It's the additional colors. It's the complete finishing, whether that's embossing, de-embossing, foil stamping. It's the more creative side that's coming into print. The run lengths have got shorter, the personalization, the rise of personalization, the cross media that we're doing. I think that's changing the industry. I think also we're starting to lose. I spoke to someone the other night, and the days of the second, third, fourth generation of owning a business sort of seem to have gone. It's a lot of mergers and acquisitions. I mean, I've seen more mergers in the past 12 months than I probably did in the previous 10 years.
Mm.
It's crazy. People are looking for what comes next. And a lot of the customers I've been consulting with are in that, do I go all in and I put the big bet on the business, or do I sell the business now? And so it's a challenging time for the industry. I think we're going to continue to see the diversification, whether it's wide format for display graphics, whether it's in the carton space. I think we're going to continue to see that diversification.
I think there's a gap emerging as well. We touched on it before we came on the air about the rise of private equity, which of course is going in at the, let's call it the thin end of the wedge, but it's the scale end of the wedge. And somebody told me a few weeks ago that 80% of the print industry's PSPs have 10 employees or less. And so the 80 is where all the small, let's call them mom and pop businesses live. So the 20%, the big boys, are attracting the serious investment. And is there a risk that gap is going to increase between the haves and the have-nots?
There's certainly some interesting theories on this. And I think the challenge for a lot of businesses now is the fork in the road. And I describe the fork in the road as, do you become the industrial manufacturer? Are you Ford? Are you going to be able to manufacture that product line better, faster than anybody else? I'm looking for a penny here and a penny there and a penny here and a penny there to improve my efficiency. Or am I going to diversify and now start offering more services? Am I going to partner with people to extend those services? I think it's private equity inherently tends to be short-term investment. Right? They're not the forever owner, right? It's just the nature of private equity. So what comes next? The thing that I'm always concerned about is what comes next, because private equity is looking for a return on investment. I mean, a private owner of a business is looking for a return on investment, but they're not looking for massive multiples within a very short-term time frame. They tend to be growing a business. And in many of those smaller businesses, even 50 or less employees, a lot of them are big family companies. Everybody knows everybody. Their spouses and their children and their parents, and they get together. I think we're losing a little bit of that passion for the industry, and it's become a spreadsheet exercise. And that concerns me. When I see companies that are family owned and they're growing and they're investing and they're acquiring businesses, that's what excites me.
And I think those you mentioned earlier on about the communications gap, shall we say, because the print industry still, to this day, is not very good at telling its own story. It produces stories for other people, but it's not very good at telling its own story. With that in mind, and with that intergenerational shift in ownership of businesses, do you think it's about the story that they tell? They're a little bit trapped in this whole world of, I'm a PSP. What does that mean to a consumer? The print is dead debate rages only because consumers don't know what print does. So, for me, there's a gap here between what it is and and how it should be told. That story should be told better, shouldn't it, really?
Yeah, I think it is. And one of the challenges we've seen is the reduced amount of education that's out there. A lot of the colleges are ramping down their programs. I think, there's a lot of people, a lot of kids today that, I want to be a software developer. I want to get into software. I want to be in a tech savvy business. Print is a tech savvy business. Get people excited about it. Get, young people into the business. I think we have to tell the story better. I think as an industry, we have to broaden that story. We tell it to ourselves, we tell each other, and we all go, yep, we know that. We got to go find the people that don't know that story, get in front of these, colleges, get in front of the high schools, help them develop a program and bring in the next generation that are excited and understand this is a tech industry. I know lots of people that work in this industry that started out as software developers and they're now IT people inside a print shop. They're running the prepress department. They're running integrations. They're building integrations. It's a really smart industry. We just don't tell the story outside the industry.
And there we go. And that's kind of the reason that Print Island was created. The metaphor of Print Island is that the entire industry lives on the island and it knows everybody on the island. It's just never left. And that's kind of the goal behind this whole series is to be able to spread this information, knowledge beyond the borders of the natural island in itself.
Yeah.
And I think there's a missing piece as well, Nick, which I'd like to get your take on. That we talk about print is dead, but consumers everywhere you look, every store you go into, every bus you get on, every train you get on, every plane you get on, you're surrounded by print. It's just not in the
Yes.
way that you expect to see it. So is the gap here not necessarily in the industry, but is there somewhere that we can get this across to the consumers? Electronics are brilliant at this because they show consumers what they can do, and then they just wait for them to buy it. Print industry is the other way around. It doesn't say what it does. It just hopes somebody will buy it. How do we change that mindset?
I think we have to educate, and I think, as an industry, it is sort of a wait and see. Someone shows up and says, "Can you print this?" We need to go out to these businesses that need to do marketing, that need to communicate, whether that's signage, whether that's promotional marketing, whether that's solicitation mail, whatever that is, and make them understand the value of print. Right? Print is exciting. If you look in mainstream journalism, you rarely see anything that says, "Oh, it's a great marketing story about an email campaign or a great story about some website." We need to make sure we're telling the story that says print was a major contributor to that. We need to get people excited about it. And I think, that starts with getting to the C levels, I think it's at both ends, the C levels within an organization, but then the next generation that are excited about it and can start telling that story. I met, as I said, I did this conference recently, and I met a kid who had no print background, nothing at all. Their family was all in tech. But they got interested in print because they were doing some coding project for school. And they were trying to solve this very specific problem of print routing within their university. Fast forward, now they're excited about print because they can see where that drives a tech future for them. And I think that's where we've got to start seeing the opportunity for our businesses to tell the story that isn't just, hey, we communicate stuff, we do it through technology. And think about mailing. Most of that is the art and science of refining that list and getting that piece and A/B testing and understanding what works and what doesn't work. That's all technology, right? The print is
Yeah.
the thing they do at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for me, it's as simple as it's almost language that we use to entice people in, because the all industries, it's not just limited to print, all industries tend to speak in a vernacular that they understand, but nobody else really does. And when you don't understand something naturally, you tend to not listen. So the education that you mentioned, which is critical, but it needs to be done in a language that people go, "Oh, I see what you mean." Your example just then of that student that started with one thing and ended up with another, but it was because he came through the right door. So I just
Yes.
wonder whether there's room in the industry now for one less trade show and one more direct to consumer show, where actually we change the name on the door. It's still coming into the same room. We just put a different name on the door. Would you sanction that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the marketing of those events has to change the way they communicate. Come and see technology in action, right? People will get excited about that, right? Technology, everyone hears about AI. It's the buzz thing at the moment, right? It is very prevalent in our industry, and it's critical going forward. It's going to be there. We can bury our heads in the sand as much as we want. It's coming regardless. And I think we have to make people understand that this is an opportunity for them to really be at the forefront in a very, very old industry, to fundamentally change the way we think of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a brilliant photograph a couple of weeks ago. I was in a conversation about AI, and there was a photograph that came up of when cars replaced horses. And the people that owned all the horses, we don't need your newfangled cars. We're perfectly good, thank you very much. But a guy bought a car just so that he could have one, and then towed it with his horse. And that kind of feels where we're at the moment with we've got some AI. It's over there. We don't know what it does. The adoption of these tools, these aids to the industry, is the critical piece to advancement, isn't it?
It really is. It changes the paradigm. We talk about those multi-generational industry, family-owned companies,
Mm.
and a lot of the decisions was gut, right? My gut tells me, I think we're moving to a world where everything comes down to data,
Yeah.
right? What does the data tell me? And that's where the science comes in, and that's where the technology comes in, and that's where an opportunity for someone to enter this industry really changes. I think there is so many opportunities for technologists, whether that's on the vendor side or on the PSP side. I think there is a change.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the nice thing is as well, it's not an either or. You can still have a gut feeling about something, but you can use data to back that gut feeling up.
That's it. And I do this all the time. I'll just say, my experience tells me X. Let's just validate that. We'll run the data and we'll look at it. And, 9 times out of 10, I'm right. But there's always that 10th time that you miss that outlier, that piece of data, that critical piece that's there. And that's where, AI is exactly like a person, right? Given this set of information, I'm going to get this result. And you look at the result and you say, well, that doesn't make any sense. What piece of critical information does the AI or the person not have that led you to a different decision?
Yeah, exactly. And we go back to your dreams of being a pilot. You will know better than anybody that a plane can basically take off, fly, and land by itself if it wishes to. But the fun is when you go, do you know what? I'm going to fly this for a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And while I didn't end up being a pilot, I do spend about 40 weeks a year on the road flying around the world.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get to sit in the front seat and fly the plane, but I do spend a lot of time on a plane.
There you go. There you go. So what's next for you then, Nick? What does 2026 look like? What have you got in the plans?
At this point, Rich, it's really interesting. I've got a bunch of consulting work out there. What that looks like 3 months from now, 6 months from now, I'm not sure. I'm enjoying the ride. I'm enjoying the journey, and talking to people that appreciate the insights and the advice and the understanding of the industry, and I've seen a bunch of people that have done this. Here's some potholes you want to avoid, right? Things that we've all been down there. I believe that people are the sum of their experiences, and
Sure.
and the fact that I've been in literally hundreds of print shops has some value.
Yeah.
So I think, for me, continue consulting. I'm loving what I'm doing. Loving working with lots of customers, reconnecting with some that I hadn't spoken to for a while. And then, when the right thing comes knocking at the door, will it be the right thing? We'll know then. I always say that you never know what's around the corner. If you'd asked me 6 months before I moved to Canada, was I going there? Not a chance. Didn't even consider it. Moving to the US, didn't even consider it. So when the opportunity comes, back to, there is a little bit of gut. My gut tells me, a little bit of data, and my gut, back yourself. I think there's lots of opportunities, and for me, I'm going to back myself for the next part of the journey.
Well, this will make you smile, because many years ago I was in Australia, and I think it was Channel 7 or Channel 9 was running an advertising campaign to try and make the Northern Territories into a tourist destination, and it was essentially a swamp. So it was a bit of a stretch, but they used the line, and I've lived by this ever since: if you never ever go, you'll never ever know. And so I think that philosophy, it's an Australian philosophy, and you wear it well, sir.
Thank you very much.
Nick, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to join me on Print Island today. And wherever you go next, I know you'll be successful, because you're a good guy. So thank you for your time today.
Excellent. Thanks, Rich.